Welcome to Unexpected Points. I am your host, Kevin Cole, joined here by Josh Hermsmeyer. Josh, sorry, we're a couple minutes late here on the YouTubes, but you guys are still there, so I appreciate you tuning in. Josh is got some fall attire on here. I like the vest look to keep the core warm. I've never quite done it myself, but I have a very distinct memory of back when I used to work in finance. I would go and visit different financial institutions. We were looking at their credit obligations and different things. So whenever I went to Denver or the Colorado area, which has probably got some similarities to your neck of the woods, in attire, weather a little bit to some degree. I would go there, and even in January, basically what would happen was the polo shirts with the short sleeves would stay. There's no sleeves, but more and more core vest attire would be layered on. And I guess that they really believe in keeping the core. You keep the core warm and everything else, all the extremities follow.
Yeah, I think it's more that you don't want to layer too heavily because you go in and out of the weather, and you want to keep the core warm on short jaunts. But if you have to layer up, you want to take that crap off as soon as possible. You get into a warm house. So I think that's the idea. I was just in Seattle. There was a lot of other people wearing the puffy jackets and the vests. So I think it's a kind of a Mountain West kind of deal.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, just in case. You never know when you're going to need to do some, just hop on, start doing some cross-country skiing or something else in that, depending upon how the conditions may change day over day. So, yeah, stay prepared, stay ready, stay focused. Speaking of, well, let's focus on the NFL over here. And if we have to, we might have some election talk later. Herm says he wants to do some politics talk. So,
I did not say I wanted to do politics.
He's begging me. He's begging me.
I said I would acquiesce and talk politics as one time since it's national political.
It is election day. If you voted or not, whatever. It's up to you.
I actually have a take on that. I actually have a take on that. So we should get to that. Whether or not.
Well, there was a great.
I think you should even vote. But yeah,
there's a great. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly irrational, right? But there is a great Curb Your Enthusiasm clip that's going around about. For those who aren't fans, I'm a big fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm. So in the clip, Larry is in line with someone, and there's a big line. So he says, "Hey, who are you voting for? Oh, you're voting for the other guy. I'm voting for this guy. Why don't we just both get out of line? We'll cancel each other's votes, so it doesn't matter. And we don't have to wait in this long line." And of course, someone sees him doing that, and then he's actually hosting a election night fundraising type, it's like a fundraiser because the election's over, but you know what I mean? Like a party for this candidate that he was going to vote for. And the candidate loses by one vote. So then someone's at the party who saw him get out of line and then mentions that to everyone else, and everyone comes down on him. But yeah, so that's the one scenario, right? If you lose by one vote, then it would really matter. But again, I have to check myself because I'll keep on talking about this. We got to segment out, push this into the back here. So I have to check myself here, have some guardrails, and put this in the back. So let's start NFL, and then if you guys want to stick around for that at the end, the election talk, we can talk that. What's interesting is two of the teams that I wanted to talk about post week 9, kind of state of affairs going forward, that I thought were really interesting, actually did a little nibbling in the trade market today. What's most interesting to me, though, is one of those teams I thought was on the upswing and might want to trade for someone. Another team I kind of thought was on the downswing and maybe looking forward to 2025, but they both were adding pieces for this season. So let's start with let's go in reverse chronological order here. The Commanders just announced, we do not have, at least as of the time that I've saw, we do not have trade compensation, but they just announced that they're bringing in Marshawn Lattimore. Like it says, it says 4-time Pro Bowlers. That's good. I've seen like just Pro Bowler Marshawn Lattimore, and I'm like, it's been a few years. So they're bringing him in a trade. Lattimore, the most relevant thing I think to discuss here is the fact that he had a guaranteed salary that for this season of at least $12 million. So that is something that's now going to port over for the rest of the season to the Commanders. That became guaranteed in March of 2023, so far in advance. So this is kind of a book clearing sort of exercise, it seems like, for the Saints, who, of course, fired their head coach, now is starting to get rid of some pieces here. So it makes some sense to me. What it means going forward, I'm not sure, because Lattimore has a $31 million cap hit going forward, but a lot of that is tied into prorated bonuses. He has a $16 million, though, base salary written in here. So, no guarantees, $2 million roster bonus. That's probably getting reworked or something going forward. This could be a very short-term move, which I think is interesting, because my topic for the Commanders was going to be, what do you do with this great offense that looks, I guess, sustainable at this point? You have a chance to make a Super Bowl-ish sort of run. Do you actually do that, despite the fact that it's only the rookie year for your sensational quarterback, Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, I think you do. I mean, what are they? 7-2? 7 and
Yep.
2. Yeah, that's insane to me. So you have a potentially generational quarterback. You have a trash offense that has been, or defense that has been regressing to the mean these past few weeks. So I mean, that's
It's
just
really hard to tell, though. It's really hard to tell. It's like week in and week out, they're jumping all over the place. But yeah.
Yeah, but as defenses do, and
Right.
now you're adding, someone who, if healthy, is going to help you with cornerback depth, which is fantastic. I think this is an appropriate move. Now, we always talk about how the markets are never quite up to speed on Tuesday, but they still have them really low. I'm just speaking of the Commanders, like 16th overall in the power rankings by Unpredictable. I
Yeah.
assume that's going to come up come
Yeah,
Wednesday and
15th
Thursday.
in the offensive number is only 15th. So, oh no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the Cardinals. It's 8th offensively, 30th defensively. That
Yeah.
even seems like, I think they're a little bit better than that, potentially, at least going forward. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think they're closer to the middle now defensively, and then with this addition, their pass defense should be, improved marginally. I mean, I guess the argument would be, well, they'll probably regress quicker now, so it'll be a more average defense quicker, and the quicker you can get there, the better. And you never know, you got these high variance plays that this guy might be able to provide for you, or you might influence the offense you're facing either way to make a worse decision, and maybe 1 out of every 8 times. So that's kind of where these kind of moves, these small moves at the end at the trade deadline, kind of land for me on defense. But I definitely think Washington should be a buyer right now. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, we've had this interesting trend where I think, it's 70% noise and 30% actual signal over the last 2 seasons, where, and I don't think this is of the caliber that we've seen of these other trades, but we had, Roquan Smith come over to the Ravens. I think it was 2 seasons ago. Was it 3?
Yep.
No, I think it was 2 seasons ago.
2 seasons ago. Yep.
Mid-season, there was a big uptick in their performance. The Chicago Bears last year brought in Montez Sweat. There's big jump up in their performance in the second half of the season. I don't think this will necessarily happen with Lattimore, other than the fact that there is the regression coming anyway, probably. So my advice to the front office of the Commanders is to say, okay, this guy is in his 28-year-old season. He's not that old, right? I'm assuming he's turning 29 pretty soon. I gotta see how old is this guy. He can't be. He can't be.
Well, while you
Gosh, I
look,
feel like okay, he's
let me give
actually
you.
not until May. He doesn't turn 29 until May, so he's actually pretty. He's still not 30 yet. He's still got some time there. So I would suggest, if I was the Commanders, to, if you're going to extend him, figure out what to do with this contract, because you could just basically come to him and say, listen, we're not, you got no guaranteed money left. We're not paying you whatever that money is. Let's figure out something new. Keep that cap hit maybe low for next season if they want to bring in some other players. Figure out all the chicanery that you're going to do there. I would do it now, because he's also been injured a lot the last couple of seasons. He's coming off a hamstring injury. Maybe you can get a little bit of that injury discount, rather than getting like a natural regression in your defense, getting better in the second half of the season, and then everyone points to him as being the reason why that happens, and then have to negotiate after that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or do you think this
He's
is a
not.
1-year rental sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that's probably where I'd land. I'm looking at the compensation they just paid, which seems rather steep to me. So the Saints traded Lattimore and a 5, and Washington gave a 3, 4, and a 6.
Oh, so yeah, so they must want him. They must want him beyond this season then, right?
Oh. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but when you do it that way, and I haven't looked at this, and so this is very dangerous, but you know, just dipping my toe into the comp pick waters here, but um, I think when you do a trade like this where you're giving up premium or a lot of picks, 3 picks for one back, um, I think you're looking for that comp in return if you're doing it in a sharp way. And you need to be willing to let this guy go, and hopefully he shows out, and then he becomes someone who can get you a 4th or something like that.
But
And you
aren't they
kind of
going to
got to
be
be.
in like signing mode next offseason? That would be my concern, is that if you're in signing mode in the offseason, you're going to offset that compensatory pick.
I'm just not sure why you want old legs on in your secondary. Like I don't know that that's the way
28, that's
forward.
spry. That's spry.
Yeah,
Hey,
not for
hey,
cornerbacks.
I'm
So
48. You should see me out there on the soccer field. I'm looking good.
yeah, my Achilles already ache thinking of it. But I think yeah. So that's how I think of it. And again, I couch this in that I haven't even looked at what the comp might even end up possibly being for Marshawn. I know that there's a 10-year cutoff for vets. There's all sorts of little wrinkles here that the experts, actually people who get paid to do this, and really to get into the minutia on this, you better be getting paid because it's boring as hell. But it does matter for trades like this, and I would suggest, if it's a sharp team and they're giving up that many picks, that had to be part of the thought process. If they turn around and re-sign this guy to the deal that you suggest, even if it's sort of reasonable, I'm not sure I like it.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see what they say. I guess I'm just saying, if your plan is to do it, I would maybe do it sooner rather than later. But that's kind of the best policy when it comes to a lot of these different moves. And we've discussed, I think, in the past, some of the time value of money and things like that you can kind of the alchemy that you can do on some of these deals by pushing money out into future years. And different maneuvers there. Now, what's interesting about the Commanders, though, and this is kind of going back to where we stand with them going forward, is I remember being in the larger DC metro area here, that there's a pretty significant contingent of Commanders fans, and let me tell you, they are pumped up about Jaden Daniels and this team right in here. And I've also spoken with some of the local media in this area. So even a few weeks ago, there was this buzz, maybe even like 4 weeks ago, there's a little bit of a buzz of, hey, we might have something special this year. We need to like do something to maximize what we potentially have this season to win the division, to make a playoff run, to do all those sorts of things. At that point in time, being the bucket of, cold water that I am when fans are getting excited, I was saying, well, it's a little early. We'll see what happens. No matter how good a rookie quarterback is, we typically, top out at maybe like a top 10-ish sort of efficiency, as opposed to really getting up into that high number. I mean, we have seen it for, Dan Marino and some other guys who've really got into that area, but it's somewhat rare to get rarefied air to get to like maintain what Daniels had been doing to that point. But now that we've seen this for several more weeks, I don't know. I am feeling pretty good about this team that looks like they're a top 5 offensive team. If they are able to maintain what they're doing, and it looks at least somewhat like they can do that based upon the formula that they've had here. I don't know if they're going to be figured out in the second half. That really just rejiggering some things defensively can make that big of a difference. And they've already banked those wins, which is going to at least get them, it looks like, into the playoffs, even if the Eagles make a little bit of a comeback and win the division.
Yeah, I'm just struck by how much luck is playing a role here. So we were talking about the quarterbacks. Someone was telling me on Sunday, I was at the Seahawks game, and this guy turned to me and said, did you hear the rumor that Washington tried to trade their 2 and some other picks up to get number 1 to take Caleb? And that was their real number 1, right? And so it always strikes me how much luck plays a role. And, you couldn't get the deal done. Chicago was absolutely convinced that Caleb Williams was going to be the guy. And now, they had to take their second best pick on the board. They settled for Daniels, and now here they are. Interesting stuff. I don't know. Do you remember hearing that story or seeing that rumored around during
I don't know
draft?
if I heard that one. I mean, word of caution I would say about those is I think there are lots of exploratory conversations because I mean we heard this the prior year. We heard that Houston was looking to get up to number one, but they decided to go and trade it away to the Panthers instead because of the package here. So we heard that year. I'm trying to think of another. There's definitely other circumstances that I've heard about. Well, Joe Burrow. Supposedly the Dolphins after their tank fest where they performed too well. Performed too well when they were trying to tank and didn't get up to the number one pick. Supposedly they were willing to give away the maximum number of picks humanly possible to get up to number one. So I think those are kind of those do seem like conversations that teams should probably have, even if they're not necessarily going to get over the finish line in those circumstances.
Well, let me ask you. So, are you a fan of that type of trade from 2 to 1 and giving up? I mean, what can sometimes be a massive amount of picks, like the Niners, for instance, they didn't even get up to 1, and they had to give up multiple future firsts.
I mean, I think it's one of those deals where I think I would have to have my robo GM next to me, which has the ability to veto my own decisions. And because I would probably be able to talk myself into that sometimes where you see.
On what basis, though? On what basis would you say the first quarterback on the board is exponentially better than the second? And what would it be? I mean, that's what you're saying.
I'm not going to take your term of exponential, but no, I think the consensus was that Caleb Williams was a tier above the other quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels a little bit older, hadn't started as much, other things there. Again, I think it's the wrong move by just a pure focused, cold-blooded analysis, but I would be worried about myself. Because if you did do it, I think you get praised for it. And I think there'd be a lot of like happy vibes about it in the moment. And whenever that's the case, you have to check yourself, right? So that's what I'm saying. I need my robo GM or I need a committee, like a committee of people that could say, wait a second, Kevin, I know that, you have this rationale, but we discussed these things in advance. We discussed how these are 55, 45% coin flips and how we can't do this. So based upon that, the non-decision makers are able to veto the decision maker. I think that could be helpful sometimes. So I would want to have some sort of structure like that in place.
Yeah, I definitely agree that you want to have people to remind you of the kind of sober mindset you need to have when you're making these decisions, because they aren't made in game. For instance, like again, back to the game I was at, there was an opportunity for the Seahawks to go for 2 at the end, and they chose not to. There was also an opportunity to go for 4th down after they didn't make it on 3rd and 1. And those kind of decisions at the time, like I was sitting there really rooting for the Seahawks, and I was like, ooh, maybe kick the field goal. Like, nah, let's not go. So I understand a little bit like emotionally what you're talking about. Like that can get in the way in those type of decisions. But when you're in the front office and when you have 6-9 months to plan, and then you get the opportunity, you need to have sane, sober, well thought out thought process, and not allow emotion to really overrule that. I think that's a cell phone. That's a cell phone.
Well, let me flip this around for you then, right? Because I think what we don't see, right, is we don't see teams trading out. Let's look at the other perspective, right? We don't see teams trading out of that number one pick.
Mike Williams to the Steelers.
And okay, we could skip that.
Yeah.
So you don't see teams trading out of that pick though. Like, let's think about it. There's no reason that we should view this any differently, right? If you are the Chicago Bears and you have someone on the phone willing to trade up, the only thing that puts you in a different situation there is, again, that same exact phenomenon that I'm talking about of the praise that would go to the Commanders, the disdain that would be heaped upon you by fans in media for trading back one pick would probably be even heavier, honestly, than the praise that would go to the other side. So there is something there too, right? Like again, if the Bengals had these discussions with Joe Burrow, they didn't trade out. If the not the Panthers, I guess it was the Bears at the time, had these discussions with the Texans, and maybe even the Panthers could have figured out what they were going to do to have a different arrangement where they would have been second and the Texans would have been first. That didn't end up happening. This year, it didn't end up happening. So we shouldn't view that decision any differently either, right? But even you can get a feeling that it's harder to do if you're in that number one pick to move down.
Oh, sure. I mean, and I think it's irrational on both sides. And you know, you need to pay up because you're dealing with an irrational party on the other end who has an endowment effect bias probably going on there. That's already their guy. They've already had all the imaginings of how it's going to be like with him in the building. They've been thinking about him for months because they know they've had the first pick. I think, yeah, you're fighting both of those and it's an uphill battle. But I mean, again, if it was me, I don't think it would be that hard for me to convince the people, because I would be choosing smart people to be around me and to, like you say, hold you in check. It wouldn't be that hard to make the argument. No, let's go down one. These guys are not that far apart, even though we do think and we have thought about it. We've envisioned him in our building. You know, let's take these picks. This is a great idea. Look at all the great quarterbacks that have come in the past 10 years that have not been the overall number one. So, you know, let's it's a coin flip either way. Let's give ourselves some optionality and have those extra picks later.
Now, of course, the additional layer is like ownership, right? So convincing them to move out of that number one pick when they're probably only tangentially attached to the quarterback prospects there. You know, if you have your owner sitting around, he's like, I've been hearing about this Caleb Williams guy for the last 36 months. And now you're telling me we're not going to take him and we're going to take someone else. That could also be a little bit of a hard sell.
For sure.
Okay. So we're in on the Commanders doing this move, and I like it.
Well, I'm not sure I like the price. I'm not sure I just want to be very clear. I'm not sure I like the price.
No, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. I do think there's a bit of talk about the endowment effect. I think there is a bit, like, I'm probably less gung-ho about some of these deals where teams are like, why not? And it's like, well, you know, there's a price, right? There's always a price that you can go to where you're saying, yeah, this is why not. This is why you don't do it at this particular price. So there is something to that. And I think with the rookie contract, right, it becomes a thing of like, you can't spend too much, you can't invest too much in this rookie contract window. So I think that could be a problem. And you're right there. They did get a 3rd round pick, I think, for Jahan Dotson. So I don't know if this is that exact pick, but that was a nice little Howie. The Howie worshipers out there could talk about how Jahan Dotson is doing so far this year. But one thing that I wanted to look at, trying to get my mind around the Daniels thing, because to me, you know, I know we flatten the game to quarterbacks all the time. Defense doesn't matter. Every other player on offense doesn't matter. Coaching doesn't matter.
Whoa. Defense doesn't matter mostly for fantasy. It matters very much for real football.
I'm being a little bit facetious here. I'm overstating. Okay. I'm making this a hyperbole, the argument a little bit. Okay. But what I wanted to look at is to say, okay, again, I know these year-end type of numbers that we haven't had the quarterbacks who've really been up at that sort of level at the end of the year since, you know, maybe Marino or something like that. Even the guys that we say were there, like a CJ Stroud or a Herbert, they weren't really in that top 5-ish sort of category. So I looked and I said, through week 9 in the NFL season, I looked back at the data going back to 2020, rookie quarterbacks, what are the best guys in terms of EPA per play ranking 9 weeks into the season? So Dak Prescott was actually leading the NFL in EPA per play amongst quarterbacks 9 weeks through the season. He was like, that was a weird one. I don't know if it was because he was a later pick and maybe that's why he never got the hype, or there was some vote splitting going on with him and Ezekiel Elliott, where like the rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year votes were being split. The MVP, I think Zeke got more MVP votes than Dak. And again, we have this weird system where you can only vote for one person, right? We didn't have the tier ranking, but then Dak got the offensive rookie of the year over Zeke. So he faded a bit the rest of the season, but he was up there. Ben Roethlisberger was fourth in EPA per play in 2004 on very low volume that season. Deshaun Watson was 4th before he got injured in 2017. Justin Herbert was actually in the mid-teens. He wasn't playing nearly that well. He kind of came on at the end of the season. RG3 was 8th. Cam Newton was 5th. CJ Stroud was 7th. So there really haven't been, other than Dak Prescott, guys who have been this high either. So I don't want to necessarily lump Jaden Daniels into the bucket with all rookie quarterbacks when he really is like outperforming those other rookie quarterbacks even to this point.
Yeah, and the ceiling he's shown has been extremely high. Like we saw 2 weeks ago, Caleb Williams post one good game, right? Three touchdowns, something like that, and people were like, "Ah, here it is. Here's our boy." And it's like, and I agree. Hey, way better to show the upside in your rookie season when you could go your whole 2 years without actually showing it, like Josh Allen did, basically, or at least the bad outweighed the good. And now you're saying, well, 2 weeks after that, now people, I think, would almost certainly take Daniels over Williams again. I mean, they flip flop a couple times. I think Daniels is becoming more and more of the profile that we saw to Mahomes, right? When he was starting his first year, it was his second year overall. But people were saying, look at this guy, he's absolutely legit. And I was the one going, regression, this stuff never works. I've kind of come around to the idea that if you're going to show these kind of ceilings, with massive upside early in your career, that you should probably chase that. You should probably lean in.
Yeah. I mean, they did have, they converted another 2 fourth downs this last week. So they're up to, depending upon whether you count penalties or not, I think they're up to either 10 of 10 on fourth down or 12 of 12 on fourth down. So, a little bit interesting. I was watching the game, and there are just plays, like, for instance, I think there was 11 seconds left and they had the ball 20 yards away from the end zone. So they basically had one play. I don't think they had any timeouts either. And they threw a touchdown at the end. And it's just, in retrospect, you look back at it and you're like, oh, that was a kind of a poor coverage mistake by the Giants there. But like, he just diagnoses things really quickly. So it is very, very impressive. But of course, I want to keep myself in check because regression is always around the corner with some of these guys.
I have a question for you. You just mentioned
Yep.
busted coverages. How much credit do you give to the offense for inducing the defense to bust?
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't a busted coverage. This was just, what are you doing? Because
No,
like,
no,
why?
but
How
I
do you
just
let the
mean
guy
in
get
general.
behind
I'm
you?
asking you in general. You were throwing shade on my Chargers just recently, saying that they didn't deserve to win because of busted coverages. I don't know how that's in your model, by the way. I'd love to
It's
understand
it's
that. Okay.
not.
Okay.
Well, the big plays, it's just big plays. I mean, it was a 3rd and 21. They scored a
They scored a
touchdown.
touchdown on a 3rd and 6 after a sack too. It was wild.
Yeah, I know. But the 3rd 21 really stuck out to me. Now, it depends, right? I think we shouldn't we shouldn't take away too much credit from the offense, because the reality is, like, if we looked at every single play, you would find lots of busted coverages that aren't leveraged, right? Or that aren't that you don't end up finding the guy. Now, when it's like 50-yard touchdowns, maybe I start to look into to that a little bit more than I do on this sort of play, where it was basically like a 4 verts type of situation, and he diagnosed and found the right guy and placed the ball in the right spot immediately. So it all depends, I guess. But you're right. I wouldn't take it away. I wouldn't do the PFF, play-by-play grading and say, when you make a huge play down the field, finding the wide open guy, that's a 0. Like, it's not a 0 for me. Now, it's not as great as a perfectly feathered ball over the top of the defense and something like that, but it's not a 0 for me.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious.
All right, so we got the Commandos out of the way. Let's stay in the NFC East here, because the other trade of the day, which I don't know, this is not that big of a trade either, honestly, but we're looking at Jonathan Mingo, former top pick, former, was a 2nd round pick or 1st round pick of the Panthers just a year ago, is now going over to the Cowboys. And what's interesting is, I was going to talk about the Cowboys this week in, like, what are we doing? Because their season is over. Dak Prescott is going on IR, which means at least 4 games missed. They're just bad. It's not like they've been unlucky. Like, by my numbers, they're just bad. Like, I've had them being bad for a while now, where I actually felt like I didn't believe my own numbers, how bad that they had been this season. But now the people have kind of caught up with that perception. What are the Cowboys doing here? They extended Dak in the offseason. They extended CeeDee Lamb. They're throwing money at all these people. They have like 5 guys who are going to take up 80% of their cap going forward, and they're trading away picks. What's going on here?
Jarrah. This is Jerry stuff. I don't know. He's just doing Jerry things. I think as we got closer to the season and Jerry wasn't able to actually extract the kind of contract he wanted out of Dak, I think he kind of
Are
panicked.
we in the Joe Biden phase of the Jerry of the Jerry
I don't know.
administration here? Sorry to get political. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say Jerry is more of a Trump guy. Like he's more of a fillet the microphone kind of guy, glory hole kind of.
I'm speaking more in cognitive
No,
potential
no,
cognitive
but I just
decline.
mean like
Yeah.
I think he's more.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
just
I mean,
gonna.
he's obviously voting for Trump. We know
No,
that.
I'm not just talking about politically. I just mean like his attitude towards decision making. He's just gonna
Yes.
go with whatever it is. I don't think it's so much that he's cognitively impaired. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of that, but it's more that he's just absolutely convinced that what he's going to do is the correct decision and going to glory hole it all the way. And I think one of the interesting parts of the Dak conversation, I don't know if we talked about it early on, but it's that whole question: do you pay for a mid quarterback, and is Dak mid? I don't know that he's
We
mid.
talked about that before the signings, that you have CD,
Yeah,
you have Dak, and you have, why is his name escaping me? Defensive
Parsons.
end. Parsons. Yeah. So
Yeah,
what were we going to do there?
right. And like, how do you allocate the money for building a team that's actually going to be competitive? And you only have CD now, so he only has really one offensive weapon out of 5 eligibles, and I don't know that puts Dak, even healthy Dak, in a good position to be the guy that you just paid. So as you mentioned, when he started, third round pick, I think he was, or was it fourth? I can't remember. And he came out of the gate, with really good EPA per play, and he's been a better than serviceable quarterback. I don't think he's mid. So I didn't totally hate him paying Dak. There are some that hate it. There are some that say
They
it's
were
the
in a
biggest
bad
mistake.
spot. Leverage wise, the fact that they went franchise tag, had to sign a big deal, which they would have to renegotiate. So also, like, they have no wiggle room to do anything, so they had to extend in order to get more cap space. It was just like they put themselves in the worst negotiating positions on these deals with Dak.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think all that kind of, I don't know that you can draw a bright line from their bad decision with Zeke, who, by the way, did you see he was a healthy scratch because he didn't make the team meetings or something? He's like, so suddenly he's a malcontent. I mean, on top of being washed, this is just incredible, incredible content.
But at least he
But
got paid, so he's doing all right. Hopefully he's doing all right.
yeah, I know. But like, you get paid, you feel like you'd be thankful to Dallas for bringing you back and keeping you in the fold. But I don't know, whatever. Not getting the snaps, maybe. But yeah, no, I think it's a big mess. I think they need to tear it down. Unfortunately, I don't know what that even's going to look like. Right? I mean, it's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, it's interesting. There's a comment here about how can you fix the Cowboys? I feel like you have to fire McCarthy now, let Zimmer coach rest of season, and then try to trade Parsons for a first plus, but maybe more. I mean, the issue is, like, once you've made the Dak contract extension, you're saying that you're competing, right? Like, you're saying you're competing. So now, if you're going to let Parsons go, who, if you re-sign him, that cap hit's not really going to come for a couple of years necessarily there. I don't know. Then what are we doing? Because I mean, arguably Parsons is, of course, I haven't really heard much from him this year, but you can say arguably he's a better player at his relative player at his position than these other guys, CD and Dak, are relative at their position, obviously. But again, the quarterback is everything. Without the quarterback, it all falls apart. So yeah, I guess I wouldn't have minded trading Parsons if it was part of a, like, we're going to let everything go, but I feel like they're almost locked into not being able to let everything go. I think that's the weird situation they have here. The only thing they can really do is probably have to trade Parsons because they need some flexibility. They need first round picks. They need cheap contracts coming in to build around these other guys. Hope they get a Saints 2017, the Marshawn Lattimore draft. Hope they get one of those types of drafts next season, and then can get some upside with coaching and whatnot going forward.
Did you mention the Mingo trade?
Well, we mentioned that it happened. Yeah, we
Yeah.
mentioned that happened. So, yeah, that was kind of like the jumping off point, which we kind of
Yeah.
forgot about because
Yeah.
Mingo is not that important
Did
as
you
far as
did
this.
you
But again,
did
you're
you
giving
talk
away
about
picks.
did you talk about what was given up? Yeah.
Fourth round pick, I believe, right? It was a seventh and a fourth were exchanged. And I would say for me, fourth round is like you can find some guys in the fourth round. You can find guys in the fourth round. Fifth, sixth, seventh. I'm a little bit, obviously there's a gradation as it goes down, but I kind of like fourth round picks. So I don't think that's nothing to give up.
No, it's not nothing. It does get pretty flat there in terms of surplus value, but it's yeah, definitely for just would you get a seventh back? Yeah, that's pretty much a throwaway.
I mean, the
So
thing is he has no salary, right? So you're taking you're he's still in his rookie contract for the next couple of years after that. So you're getting a cheap player. But I don't know. When do these guys work out? Like, when does it work out when you do these sorts of moves? I guess the Browns traded for Elijah Moore a couple of seasons ago with a pick swap, and he's been meh. I don't know. I feel like for these receivers, sometimes you can make that leap going forward, but I don't watch a lot of Panthers football. I'll out myself here as not watching a lot of Panthers football, but I hear that he is like uniquely looked bad by the eye test for many people.
I can't believe no one's been going after Coker. I think he's a UDFA. They had him on the taxi squad for most of the season. Um, I think they'd be willing to part with him for like a less than a fourth. Like they'd probably be willing to take the profit on a sixth, I would think, maybe. I mean, even if you had to go a fifth, it's still better than this. And Coker's a big kind of Mike Williams-ish kind of guy. And he's really shown, well, I think some promise out there in Carolina. Again, they may be really high on him. It's one of those things like, when you find a diamond in the rough, sometimes the endowment effect kicks in and you don't want to let him go even for a pretty nifty profit. So maybe that's happening too. People have asked, but they're raiding the cupboards in Carolina, and I think they're leaving some of the best stuff that's on the lower shelves, just leaving it behind. That's kind of weird to me.
Well, this interesting comment here. Is there any argument to trade CD over Parsons? I think there is. This goes into also you can leverage ownership's willingness to burn money on this one because you already like gave him the signing bonus and everything. You're saving cap in the short term and the long term if you trade him next off season. Maybe you could say you could try to do it now, but they did bring in Mingo, so maybe they would try to do it now. I don't know. I would not be against it. Let me put it that way. For figuring out what to do going forward. And I think I would do that. I just feel like it's easier to potentially hit on some receiver that you're going to have with Dak Prescott than it would be to find that, defensive player of the year type of edge player in the draft. So I would argue with that. But again, you have to have ownership that's comfortable straight up taking money and throwing it into the fire in order to get higher trade compensation. And maybe Jared's that guy.
Yeah, perhaps. I think a better time to trade CD would be in the offseason when people have a better sense of what their books look like, make some room. I think you could get more for him. You won't have to take as much in terms of the cash hit. So yeah, I think you just wait on that. And again,
Yeah.
then you got all the things we talked about before, which is that I don't know how after you sign CD you trade him. Like I just don't know how that works PR wise internally, how you sell that. So
Well, you have a new coach, right? You have a new coach come in.
How do you attract a new coach after one of the best is
It's the Cowboys.
it's only
There's
it's
a lot of
Jared will
candidates out there.
accept. I don't know. Around the league, I think going to the Cowboys is like seen as not a great place to go as a coach.
Here you
Honestly,
go. Here we go. What about this suggestion here we have in the chat? Belichick at 73 years old. Talk about cognitive decline. That's a good okay, I'll say, and this I know this is apocryphal. When I watch, because he's saying pay, because someone else said pay Belichick $20 million a year. When I watch the Manning cast and it's the Manning brothers, and then they bring in Bill, I'm not very impressed by Bill Belichick for his commentary and what he has to say on there. So I'm much. It's
I am
Peyton. Peyton's number one, of course. Peyton, and then Eli, and then Bill's like kind of on the bottom from what I'm getting, honestly.
I was very impressed by his girlfriend's Halloween outfit.
That's, I mean, okay. I would like to say I'm impressed by that, but I think if I have my committee, the trade committee, if I have my, my what should a 73-year-old who should a 73-year-old man be dating committee making that decision for me, even though I'd be like, gaga, let's go. They would veto that, and they'd be like, no, you need to let's
I'm
get
sure
something
the
more in your sort of age range, someone with some gravitas, someone who you can have some, deep, meaningful conversations with,
oh,
perhaps.
I'm sure the dinner time conversations are sparkling.
She's just
Tremendous stuff.
posting on Instagram or something, right? Like, what's going on here? Anyway, okay, this is even worse than politics talk. We're getting into the stuff we're getting into now. So, Cowboys reset. Okay, here's what you're gonna do, Cowboys. I agree with the in-season trade. I think in-season wide receiver trades are good to like sucker someone like a Bill Belichick into trading for a who's the guy you gave him a second round pick for from the Falcons? I'm losing it now. God, my brain is totally fried now. But anyway,
Yeah,
when he gave up
you're
that
getting
second
old.
round pick, um, or even Amari Cooper was traded to the Cowboys midseason for a first, which looked kind of bad in the moment. So yeah, I would say if you can't, you're going to need like a lot of compensation for CD Lamb. So that's not necessarily going to be an in season
No,
type of deal.
I give it like less than 1% probability of happening. No chance.
Okay, so other topics that I wanted to talk about. So we have the Chiefs last night, another close win. Are we okay? First, there was a discussion with friend of the pod, Ben Baldwin, was on the Moneyball podcast last week. I think it was just last week. I don't know. Time is fuzzy for me.
Moneyball and
Where
Ben, just some of the best people in all of football. Good stuff there.
Mo Sanu here. Someone said Mo Sanu. Thank you. But yeah, Mohamed Sanu for a second round pick. So one of the discussions there, and this would feed into what we just saw on Monday night too, was are the Chiefs doing this thing where they're like, yeah, let's save the good plays, let's save our effort, let's save everything for later on in the season. In a similar way to how people said that with the Patriots before. I am very highly skeptical of these ideas, although maybe we got more evidence of this potentially being true on Monday night. And I'll tell you my reasoning, especially in a league where you only have one bye going into the playoffs. Now I know they didn't need that bye last season to win the Super Bowl, but still, in a league where you only have one bye spot, I just think I don't know how you operate a football team with that sort of mentality. But if you're an individual player, like let's say, I guess Travis Kelce would be someone who comes to mind as an older player who's got some miles on his body, who might be like, you know what, I'm going to take it easy-ish, although he didn't on Monday night. If for the first half of the season, maybe I could see something like that, but I don't really see that as being a thing. So I don't know. I tend to think good results are a combination of good performance, good fundamentals, and good luck. I do think the Chiefs have probably been very lucky to have gotten the performance that they've gotten, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they're also fundamentally a good team.
I mean, what's the question here? Are you saying that because they had and eked out a close win that we should be
Well, okay,
distrustful
so
of it?
they're the undefeated team. According to betting market power rankings, I'm looking at now, they were second last week to the Lions. Now they're third, a little bit behind Baltimore.
I think that comes back up.
So the markets discount them a little bit. My numbers discount them even a little bit more, just looking at like pure numbers based analysis. Where should they be? Because I think a lot of people will tell you, well, they should just really be number one, regardless of what's happened. That would be the theory of the performance doesn't matter that we're seeing. They're winning the games. They're doing what they need to do to win in some sort of thoughtful manner, which again, I don't know if that's how it
What
works.
game are these people watching? That was
I
one
don't
of the
know.
best.
So they win by
That
one
was
score. So then they say, oh, they're doing just enough to win.
that was the best the Kansas City offense has looked in weeks. Like Mahomes was
True.
passing for touchdowns. He did not pass for a touchdown in most of October. Like it was very bad.
Right.
It
Well,
came to
Monday
the
night was a little bit of a different game. Again, this would be more of some of the earlier results. But again, even if you look at last night, right, if the Bucks go for two at the end and convert the two, they probably win the game. Like there's only so much you can control as the Chiefs to get these close
but
victories, right?
I was actually rooting for a Chiefs loss. Like what they need and the winning and losing right now is not that important. What they need is an offensive explosion. They need to prove to themselves that they can win through the air again, that Mahomes can still beat people deep. He should have had an extra touchdown to Worthy. I don't know what the hell that catch was on the sideline. where he
Yeah,
backed himself
Worthy
out of.
seems to be a little knucklehead. We got some
Yeah,
knucklehead issues.
yeah, for sure. And then he had the prayer up to Nuke, and who caught it in triple coverage or
I call
something
that a
like that.
perfectly placed ball,
Yeah,
but go
that
ahead.
I mean, yeah, but it was wild. Like that's a very low probability completion.
Linear guy make a play, which is DeAndre Hopkins overreaction meter. How high are we overreacting? Do we want to overreact? Is like a second legitimate option really the exponential gain that you're getting there over Kelsey when you didn't have him before? What are we thinking?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a big deal. Like I think this is exactly what they needed, and I think we're seeing it already in terms of passing production. And like this was a game where the running game was not really there, and Mahomes needed to be Mahomes this week,
The
and
running
he
game was
was.
okay, but again, Worthy, they tried to run these wide receiver. The reverse was
Did they
like
lose 10
god
yards on
awful.
that stupid play? 20 yards? Oh, it was
Yeah, it was really bad.
outrageously bad. So
Yeah,
when people say that Andy wasn't in his bag, they did this shuffle pass to Kelsey again, and everyone sniffed that one out. They tried to do that reverse, which was god awful. I mean, I think he was in his bag as much as he was any other time in the past
yeah,
seasons. He just didn't work.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting because again, remember Worthy was one of those draft night. The Bills have, I mean, it's a similar. It's not similar. It's thematically similar, not even close to similar in magnitude as to what we're talking about with the whole trade back at the beginning of the draft. Is the Bills were willing to trade back. The one time everyone remembers is with the Chiefs, who took Worthy, but they actually did it twice to eventually take Coleman, who looks, like okay, that he's been playing there at least better than Worthy so far. But so many people were upset about that in the moment that they had, given Patrick Mahomes the fastest player in the draft. But guess what? It's coin flipping. We're doing some coin flipping when we're talking about the end of the first round. Who is going to be the best receiver?
Sure, and props to my Chargers again on getting Laddie. That was take the heat for not taking Neighbors, and then you go ahead and you trade up and get Ladd. Solid stuff there, guys.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where you go first round tackle, second round wide receiver seemed like a pretty easy sort of situation. Okay, let's talk Chargers because I want to talk about Justin Herbert. Okay, so I was like a very big Herbert's the guy who could maybe challenge Mahomes about 2 seasons ago, was what I was thinking. And just for my own edification, I looked at what had happened to his cumulative career EPA per play number over the last, over his career basically. It was basically after his rookie year, it was about point 0.2. It maintained that over his second year. It dipped a bit into the high 0.18 sort of area after his third year. And then now it's just been going on a steady trend down for over a year now, basically from week 1 of 2022. So, we're talking about a while now, all the way down to what it is now. But I don't feel like his reputation has gotten hurt that much amongst the cognoscenti, the quarterback guru class. Amongst, I don't know, you have to tell me what JT O'Sullivan is saying about this, because I'm sure he'll come up at some point in this discussion. And even Timo Riske, noted nerd, is all over Justin Herbert. So what are we thinking about what we've seen so far? Because it hasn't come out that much because they're still winning games.
I think liking Justin Herbert is mostly signaling. I think it's if you don't like Justin Herbert in some ways, you don't like football. He can spin it. He's got a big arm. He's a big dude. He looks the part. Like he will play in structure. He will play the play, right? So nerds like that, right? He plays the play. He's not out there scrambling, going outside of structure a lot, but he can. And when he does, he helps. Uh, but I think I'm with you in that I'm not sure. I'm not sure about him, man.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is like it matters that he's getting worse, right? Like, even if you want to say it only matters a little bit, I think we get caught up in this whole thing of like it doesn't matter at all. Oh, have you watched it? Oh, no quarterback could be playing well. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe someone could be playing well. Like, it's possible someone could be playing well in those circumstances.
Well, look, the last 4 weeks, the Chargers have a pass rate over expected. I think it's the top third, top top quarter of the league. So they've been leaning into Herbert, and they've been winning. So there's that. J.K. Dobbins is getting a little less effective, a little less efficient. Shocker, a running back regressing to league average. I think the good thing is they built their offensive line to help Herbert. And as Alt gets better, and he has been like amazingly good. He's been amazingly good this year. Last week, not so great against Myles Garrett, him and Slater. There were some issues. I mean, I have a lot of issues with that offense. I have a lot of issues with Greg Roman. So for instance, this last game, one of the Roman, just peak Roman things he was doing was on first down running play action. Okay, Kevin, you and I are like, let's go. First down play action. This is what we're talking about, right? He had two eligibles in routes. The rest of the people were out blocking to try and sell the idea was really, really, really going to be a run. No, we're really serious. This is a run, right? And in two of the three occasions, Cleveland was not having any of it. The Browns defense was like, in one, they were 2 deep, 5 under, and they were all dropping back. They were not fooled at all. Finally, I think it was in the second or third quarter, this first down play action look that Roman was absolutely sold coming into the game on. You can just tell he's going to dial that thing up until it worked. They all bit, all 4 under bit, and Quentin Johnson pulled up lame on the left, so he left his quarterback 1 out over the middle, and it was Ladd. It's all right, Lil Love. He had 1 out over the middle, and it was Ladd McConkey, and he happened to be open. I'm going to go take care of my dog. I'll be right back.
But that's good. I'm glad your dog finally stepped in, because I was not going to let too much film, offensive coordinator, whatever talk. The animals know. They can sense. We don't want to be doing too much of that. We don't want to be too much offensive coordinator talk. Okay?
No, you don't want to
all of a sudden
you're
going to have like the ringers guys come in here and start telling
no,
us
but
why.
What I'm saying is that they're goodness gracious.
All right. Let's. I get it. Roman's no good. He's Harbaugh doesn't know what he's doing, I guess. I mean, that's the thing that gets me with this. Like, okay, I will concede the fact that Greg Roman may be a moron, may not know what he's doing, may have an antiquated system, may have all those things. But then I look at it and I say, I don't know. Like, does Jim Harbaugh not know these things? Is he not smart enough to know these things? I don't know. I presume that he is. And well, yeah, for those of you who are listening in, I think Herms is out. He's throwing the dog back in the cage there. That's the reason that I would, lean off of it a little bit. But I also, not only Herbert, I want to talk about some other guys. CJ Stroud is another guy where I think it's a short enough basis where I'm not that worried about him. But I think, what I've said about him has kind of come true a bit of maybe we don't need to crown him too early for what's going on this season. So there's just a number of guys where you're looking at him, we say, okay, let's not make too many excuses for everything that's going on. Geno Smith is probably another guy that the film hipsters are making tons and tons of excuses for. I guess I'm always going to lean a little bit the other direction. I just think Herbert is interesting because he still looks pretty good by my numbers because of what he built up in the past. He has that sustained high level efficiency. I just don't know what to make of what's going forward. I think there are reasons though, like you said, because of offense coordinator, because of weapons. So I'm still somewhere in between.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on Herbert. I'm not sold on him. Geno Smith, that's another interesting case. And watching him again live, and hearing the cheering and the people talking around you and kind of, in the moment, people who are all invested in the guy, kind of hating on him. He threw a bunch of important picks in the red zone. Terrible stuff.
There's a Sam Howell contingent. It exists. It exists among Seahawks fans. I'm not joking. There are you don't know about it because it's kind of like the QAnon or something. Like it doesn't rise up to the national media, which is 100% behind Geno Smith, but it exists.
I think you're right. And they've had it with him. Like, I know there was some apologies being kind of offered that, well, he's, pressured quicker than any quarterback in the game. The offensive line is garbage, and no argument for me, except that he holds the ball a long time too, even in plays where arguably it should go out right now. And so I was in the stands and these guys, people are cheering, get it out, get it out. Come on, Gino. What are you looking at? And I think that's part of the frustration. But then after all his mistakes, he'll throw absolute seeds and get you right back in the game, right? And I think it's that kind of Jameis light quality that he has that leads to all the frustration.
Yeah. I think it's those throws are what bring along all the people, right? They say, oh man, like so few people can do that. So therefore they kind of extrapolate that too far to saying then so few quarterbacks could be doing what Geno Smith is doing. And it's like, if you want to say literally doing what Geno Smith is doing, like they have to play by play throw the same exact throws as Geno Smith, then there's an argument of like, oh yeah, maybe there are fewer than 10 quarterbacks who could actually do what he's doing. The problem is you don't have to produce that way, right? There's other
Right.
ways to create value offensively, and there are specifically really other ways not to lose massive value that Geno Smith does. And that matters too. I mean, obviously it was the worst case scenario, the fact that was taken back for a pick six, but it wasn't pressure that caused that. It wasn't something that no other quarterback could have dealt with that caused that. And when you have the bottom barrel outcome, you have to factor those in. And that's what frustrates me about some of those conversations.
No, that's it's a really good way of framing it. It's kind of like in poker where you can actually get more value from checking and calling against certain types of opponents in certain situations, and you don't need to be aggressive and raising all the time. And I kind of think that might be Gino. So
Yeah, you don't have to play the game on extra hard mode, if you don't want to. And I know people like to put that on the coordinator a lot, but the quarterback has some agency when it comes to doing those sorts of things. And I think Gino puts the game on himself a little bit too much in the extra hard mode. Okay, so we're 56 minutes into this. Do I have anything really good that I wanted to talk about? We don't need to talk about the Richardson Flacco thing. I think I said enough on that. It's I'm not interested. Unless you do you want to talk about that or not really?
no.
No? Okay.
Although
Yeah,
you
I
had
don't
a
have anything to say about it other than it annoys me if people are like, "Oh, yeah, obviously Flacco's better in the short term, but you should be starting Richardson." And then now you're gonna say, "Oh, look, Flacco's not good in the short term." Okay, well, what? There's two different arguments. So let's go ahead and have it. I have no idea what you're gonna talk about, but, let's what politics talk do you have for me here?
oh
Or
I
polling
don't
talk or modeling talk?
I do not. I have one take, and that's that I don't believe it's necessarily sharp to vote. And it's for a
I'll
basket of
I'll
reasons.
I'll I'll segment that and set it out on social. So this is good. That'd be good. That'd be good for today. I'll be like, Josh Hermsmeyer says, "Don't vote."
Yeah. No, I don't think it's sharp. Sometimes, like for instance, I've lived my entire life in California and in northern Idaho, and in California, my vote didn't matter, no matter which way I went, and in Idaho, it doesn't matter. Clearly, it's even matters even less. Um, and in return for that, right, you give up a lot of your privacy by registering to vote. Your information becomes completely public, your address, your email, your phone number, and all of this is given to political campaigns, is used by marketing agencies, even though it's illegal. It's just kind of washed through the system. Um, it and on top of all that, I think voting for local elections is obviously sharp and something you should do because your vote absolutely matters. We're talking about thousands of votes that decide things up here, in total. So in that regard, you probably should register to vote. But in presidential elections, man, I don't know. I don't know that it's all that important. So that's my take on the presidential election. Unless you live in one of probably 6 states each year, sit it out if you like, or every 4 years. Sit it out if you like. I have no problem with that.
Well,
The other
I
things,
have a related take. It's not
okay,
necessarily that voting doesn't matter, but I would say from a perspective, from a mind frame perspective, even as an American citizen in this country, the way things work with different states being different, how much our votes affect different things. I guess I would just take a perspective of almost being an observer of things that happen, not thinking of yourself as some sort of great force of agency in the world of what happens. So, hey, someone wins, someone loses. Sure, you can have a little bit of an effect, but not much of an effect. How much is your life actually going to change versus all these things you see on social media about all these big injustices that are going on in whatever way they're going? Not that much, probably. I mean, some people's lives will change, not everyone's lives will change. So I kind of like to look at it as if almost like as if you're living in a foreign country or something like that, and you can't even vote. If you didn't have the right to vote, but you live there, how you would view things that are going on in that country. You got to have a little bit of that perspective.
sure. So I guess no, I don't have anything that I terribly want to talk about, but I know you were texting me earlier asking me some questions about my feel for the probabilities. I mean, if there's anything you want to touch on there, happy to do it.
I mean, my just to try to give my own, like, I'm not biased case for myself is we had discussed this going into a little bit behind the scenes going into the last election. As far as I was overconfident that Biden was going to win, I thought maybe he was being underpriced in betting markets who were lower on him than something like Nate Silver. Well, what's interesting about last election is, like, the polling was actually more off, right, in 2020 than it was in 2016. It just happened to be that Biden still won, so we don't have, like, this, this impression in our mind. So I was off there. So I guess, I'm more positive that Trump will potentially win this year. But I guess I would just say, like, the whole microcosm of electioneering, punditry, polling, forecasting, it's just like such a small sample type of event for everything
Yeah.
that it drives me a little insane, being that, like, you think sports betting is bad. You think people are biased there as far as that's concerned. Like, one of the things that stood out recent to me is when this Ann Selzer Iowa poll came out and people went nuts. And I'm thinking to myself, people are literally saying she's so accurate based upon, like, how many things are we talking about, that we're going to overvalue this, even though I don't believe her results. But if you just, so it's like they're saying, like, I don't actually believe Harris is going to win Iowa, but I find her to be accurate. So therefore, I think this is meaningful, even though I'm saying it's a very inaccurate. I think it's a very inaccurate number. Like, the mental machinations that go on with people just drive me completely insane.
So I think what's interesting about the Seltzer poll in Iowa, the one that put Harris up, I think 6 or 8 or something. I don't know. I can't remember the exact number. I think it's 6.
Yeah.
The argument that is rational and well thought out is that, well, I think there were two things at play. First of all, people like Nate and others, both Nates, the 538 Nate, my former boss, and then the guy at the New York Times. I
Nate
think
Cohn, I believe.
Nate Cohn. I think they both have been harping about hurting, right? And it's clear that these pollsters are doing something that I absolutely hate in projections as well for
Is it
football.
clear, or is it just a 50-50 sort of situation? I mean, Nate
No,
has a 50-50. Well, the
no,
herding thing also, I had to mute herding on, because all these people who never even heard of this term like 48 hours ago, who are like, oh, they're confidently tweeting about herding herding
sure.
going on. But
Yeah,
anyway,
no,
go
I
ahead.
agree with that. But obviously we've been talking about it for years at 538. But I think
Yeah.
that the difference here is that there was a lot of people coming down hard on these pollsters for hurting and saying we need to report our outliers. That's how we get good estimates for what the actual probability of a win will be for either side. And then finally one comes out, and it's from someone who absolutely is well respected in the field, and it happened to be on the Harris side. So this was
Yeah, I
absolute.
think that last part is very meaningful, maybe the most meaningful part, but go ahead.
Perhaps. But what's also interesting about it, from kind of if you are being honest about the way these things work, polling error can go both ways. I agree with you that if there is polling error, it's far more likely to go against Trump, just because, again, Nate
I don't know if
Cohen
I
is
even know that, it's true, by the way. That's, again,
well.
it's another one of these small sample things. We
Well,
flipped heads twice in a row, so, I
Well, let
don't
me
know.
give you the evidence for why. I wouldn't just say that. So again, Nate Cohn, he said it's like 16% more unlikely to get a response out of a GOP voter than a Democratic vote. So a Democrat voter is 16% more, like percentage points more likely to respond to their polling. And this is the New York Times Siena poll. This is one of the best, a triple A grade. And when people are admitting this kind of thing, non-response bias is a thing. When people admit that's true, and then they say, "Well, how are you dealing with this?" and gets really artsy and hand wavy. It's about how they model likely voter turnout. It's whether they ask who you voted for in the last election and whether they weight that. Some hate that idea. They say, "Well, people don't." They misremember. They misreport. They lie. This isn't a good way to figure this out. Some people are just saying we're going to use a weighted model using last year or the last elections, percentages, and that is actually an effective way of doing it. But those are modeling decisions, not polling decisions. You see what I'm saying? Like, now you
Yeah.
become a polling modeler, and that's something they kind of don't like to say about themselves. So, say all of that to say, if this is accurate in any way, it means the polling error is going towards Kamala, and that could be the case. And if that's the case, since all of these states are correlated, it could be a complete just landslide for her.
Well,
And so
optically for in the electoral college,
in the electoral
right?
college, that's what
Yeah,
matters.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what matters.
I know, but I'm just saying it's one of those well, that's why I think that okay, so here's like we talk about Nate Silvers of the world or the Nate Cohens of the world or whoever doing these pre-election forecasting. They're in a bad spot for this election because normally their value comes into play where people are a little bit less sophisticated, these betting markets no one's really talking about, and where you have this strong weighting from punditry to be like it's a 50-50 race, anyone could win. That their value came like during the Obama years of saying like no, the polling says he's going to win. Like don't like let's pay attention to the data. When the polling isn't telling you who's going to win and it is a 50-50 race and a small error in either direction could end up having a sweep in one direction or another. So like these optically outlier outcomes according they're not really outlier of it being a landslide in one direction or another are pretty high. They're going to get shit heaped on them for the results, no matter which direction it goes.
That's true, but I also think they're doing a service in kind of pointing out how and why surprising outcomes occur, and that the range of possibilities is large and wide, and that if one of these polls that we consider an outlier is actually honing in on something real, how that correlative effect can lead to something surprising, right? To our expectations. Our expectations is going to be close, but the actual result may not be close. That's important to understand, and that's a probabilistic argument that people just aren't comfortable with. And so I
Yeah.
think that the Nates of the world are helping at least educate the people who have the ears to hear, if that makes any sense.
No, it does make sense. And I think it's interesting because like I agree for you and for me and for some others, I think it's a valuable exercise. The thing is like he's expanded so far beyond that. And like the New York Times has expanded so far beyond that. It would be like if I had the audience of like Nick Wright or something like that. Man, that would be tough, honestly, to deal with all the noise that's surrounding something like that. So that's why I think it's a weird thing. Like people have a strong appetite for the content who don't have the temperament to really be able to process the content, and that it's like a weird mismatch.
You mean kind of like GMs?
Kind of like GMs, but
I
again,
think
it's yeah.
look, I mean, you're basically making an argument that at some point we need to take a step back from the models and reinsert vibes. I mean, it's basically what you're saying, because there's a lot of places where the models can't really tell us anything important, and decisions need to be made. The games have to be played. So
Well,
yeah,
there was an argument, and I don't think I believe this, but I think I can entertain it. Is that the argument was these election forecasting polling based models do more harm than good because most people when they see um, just simple things like when they see Trump has a 60% chance to win, they think that's a forecast that he's going to win 60% of the national vote share and things like that.
I don't know what to fucking say to the enumerates. Like
Well,
I
so
am sorry.
it
I don't
happens.
know what to fucking say to you. Like,
No, I agree. No, no, okay.
stop being an
No,
idiot.
I mean, I'm with you, and I agree with like ideally, no matter how your work is interpreted and skewed. And for instance, there was someone who was trying to dunk on Nate for saying like, "Oh, he's just gonna like adjust the model to give Harris more credit," and then he posted a news article that said Nate says Harris is path to victory. And then you read the news article and it's like in the article, Nate says, if Harris wins these 3 states, then she's probably going to win. But they're framing it as like Harris is probably going to win. It's like, no, he said if these 3 like people. So it's just there's just such bad incentives for people to misinterpret your work that obviously you're not going to go and say, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go, uh, form an igloo up in Alaska and like get away from the world and never deal with society or human
Or
beings
North
again.
Idaho.
But but it is interesting to see, right? That people really are that bad. Like I think sometimes I'm in a bubble where I don't realize how bad people are at interpreting these things.
Yeah, I think people think either Nate is a soothsayer, should be ignored just because on basic principle that for kind of the same reasons you said, this is a 50-50, there's really nothing he can add, or that he's a clown. Like, and then there's like he has fans,
Peter
right?
Thiel.
People,
He's a Peter Thiel
yeah,
influenced guy.
yeah. So there's all that, but like there's sharp people that on the right who I talk to. I think it's important that you have friends on all sides of the spectrum who are
Mhm.
smart, who are smart. And he is a very smart guy. He happens to be on Newsmax a lot. I do not agree with a lot of what he says, but that's not the point. The point is he's very smart. And so I'll talk to him and he thinks Nate's a clown and he thinks the polling error and it's 65%, odds of Trump. And I don't know where you get that, right? And so
But even 65% isn't that high if you think about it, you
even
know?
Polymarket, which is full of these types, right? Um, don't put it at anywhere near 60% right now.
No, I agree, but I'm just saying I also think we interpret 65 as being some huge, huge number where, you know, it's not that random of an event like a game, like a sports game before it happens. I mean, there
For it
is like
for the evidence to support 65, Trump would probably have to slightly win the popular vote. If he slightly wins the popular vote, then my guy was probably right to call it at 65%. But that's really the only outcome. If this is slight Harris, then there's no way it would be an improbable world where he was correct.
yeah, I think the popular votes are somewhere around 75 or 80-20, something like that. For that. Okay, so one other thing I'll mention. This is I want your take on this. This is the last thing I have on Nate where or these forecasters that I'm not quite sure of. Good old Nick Taleb, the Black Swan, quite a colorful personality, let's say, on social media. Not a big fan of Nate Silver and his critique, or one of the main points of his critique, I think has some validity. So I want to propose this by you is that in some ways I find it similar to different modeling efforts I've seen in the NFL where they're modeling in week 2 of the season team strength, who will make it to the Super Bowl, and they're overconfident because they're saying, oh well, this team is this good at this point, and they're not building in enough of non-stationarity going forward for what will end up happening. So I guess the idea would be when Nate's model, it's not fluctuating that much, but when it's going up to 55 one way, 60 one way, then back over to 60 the other way, and now it ends up at 50-50 in the end. The point from Taleb is we should, in particular, the point was from Taleb when it was like Trump was first the nominee in 2016 and Nate had some huge advantage very early on, was that like that's absurd. You have to be almost like 50-50 for a very long time until you have real kind of late breaking information. Then maybe you can move off of it somewhat. But the reality is, especially in this type of election, there's like a ceiling and a floor that's so close together that moving it up and down along the way is just overemphasizing the small movements in these polls. And we need to build in more of this grounding effect to the 50-50 along the way.
Yeah, and his argument is basically that effectively all of this is useless because no one knows anything until 2 weeks
I
before the
don't know. He
election.
posts some academic papers, and I'm like, I can't figure this shit out. So yeah,
I've
so
read
yeah,
them. I've read them, but what it boils down to, and not saying I completely understand all the math. I mean, I just browsed it. But
yeah.
the point, what it boils down to is you shouldn't have a model until X number of days out because it doesn't matter until then, right?
Or the model should be so grounded to 50-50 that it's kind of
Basically
meaningless.
useless.
Yes, yeah.
That's what 538's model was after Nate left for the longest time that they admitted was broken, but it's just basically it would not move off its priors. Now, I am a big fan of having strong priors, right? But Caleb is basically arguing that new evidence in the form of polling should be almost completely drowned out and that we don't need to update until some arbitrary date where the evidence seems to support us moving a little bit. And then from there, you can allow polling and new evidence to actually have an effect. And I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that in principle. I think that if your model is properly calibrated and you're updating correctly, all new evidence is important. All new evidence is important. And if you look at Nate's models, they've beaten the market. Now, is that the right standard? Like the market kind of sucks, at least for the markets for betting on the presidential outcome. But he's won people lots of money because he's been more right than the markets. And I think, oh no,
Well,
oh no,
I
it's
mean, he
true.
wasn't more right than the markets the last 2 elections, I would say. I mean, Biden did win, but he had a 90% chance that Biden, or an 89% chance that Biden was gonna win, and it was a lot closer than that.
All right, that's fair on Biden, but on Trump, he definitely won people money.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, vis-a-vis the market, correct. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
vis-a-vis yeah, vis-a-vis some markets, yes.
poly market, for instance. I don't know that he's giving anyone an edge this year, right? I think poly market is what, 54 right now.
I don't know, it's
I haven't
bouncing
looked.
around. It might have been up to 60 again the last time that I
Really.
saw. But I guess Taleb's point, and this is there's another way to think about it is, like, if Nate was, let's say Nate was a bookmaker using this
Yeah,
model, right? Like,
sure.
you'd just be able to arb it and just say, "You know what? I'm gonna sell Trump whenever he's 55 and buy him whenever he's 45," and you're gonna get those opportunities along the way, no matter what the fundamentals of the election are. And if you can do that, then that's probably not a good market.
Well, what do you also need to make a distinction about what you're projecting at that moment in time. Like, is it a nowcast?
Likelihood of winning, right? Isn't that what it's
Yeah,
supposed
but
to
is
be?
it a
Or,
nowcast or is it a likelihood of winning on a date in the future?
well,
Right.
I'd hope it's the latter. I think that's part of the problem. Yeah, I think that's part of the interpretation of it. Yeah.
I think the interpretation is, I think, a little flawed. I think, given what we know right now, if the election were held today, this is what we believe the odds are, right? Not given what we know right now on November 2nd or November 5th or whatever the hell, this is who we think will win. If that question almost always has to be answered with something close to 50-50, right? But if the election were held right now, what do we think about the state of play? I think that's an interesting question to ask. I think the answers are interesting to talk about. And I don't think that just dismissing modeling because you don't like that people aren't modeling to the outcome you'd prefer is helpful.
Yeah. Well, Taleb is a very measured character, as I said on these on the Twitter streets. He's also takes shots at economists, which I enjoy. So he's got some good stuff going on there. Anyway, if you enjoyed this talk, you'll get another about 4 years from now on the next election, where, where when Barron Trump is running. Um, anyway, this is it for us this week. Hope everyone enjoyed it. We'll be back next week. Of course, the power rankings are out on the site. Buy low. You got any buy low talk for us?
Haven't run it yet this week. It's been a rough couple weeks, though. I got to tell you, we started out super hot, had two on the winning Millie Maker lineup the first 2 weeks, then one, then one, then one, and the past 3 weeks it's been fallow. So
Okay, well,
looking to bounce back.
you gotta ride the waves, in up and down, and some good ones are coming forward. Thanks again to Josh Hermsmeyer for joining me. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and I'll be talking at you again next time. Thanks.